Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, January 14th Timnath Town Council meeting. Call the meeting to order. Ms. Peters Garcia, will you please take the roll?
Yes. Mayor Robert Oxmacher.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt. Councilmember Bill Jenkins.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
All right, thank you. And Councilmember Holt and Lake, their absence today was pre-planned and excused. With 3 council members present, we do have a quorum, so we can continue. Council members, any requests to amend the agenda this evening? Very good. Then we will move on to our first item, which is very exciting. It is recognition of the state champion, Timnath Middle High School cross country champions. So can I ask the team coach and principal to come up here, and I also ask Councilmember Jenkins to assist. Good. And I think I forgot my mobile mic tonight, so I'm going to speak from here, and then we can come down and do a photo. But the town of Timnath would like to officially congratulate the Timnath Middle High School girls cross country team for their remarkable achievement in winning this year's 4A state title. These talented athletes have made history, becoming the fastest team in Colorado to go from opening a new school to clinching a cross country championship. Testing. Hello? Hello, hello. All right, we found our mics. I'll come down. So I would like to introduce the members of the team here, beginning with Izzy Schimmelfig, who was chosen first team All-State and placed third overall. Congratulations, Izzy. Next is Addison Garretts, who was chosen second team All-State and placed 9th overall. Louisa Stribley, chosen as an All-State honorable mention. Natalie Washburn, chosen as an All-State honorable mention. Rachel Dietrich, also chosen, All-State honorable mention. Team member Gray Jordan. Jensen DeAngelis. Baki. And Annie Fowler. We'll also congratulate Coach Matt Mittenberg. Congratulations, Coach. And the Timnath Middle High Principal, Jesse Morrill. I will note that these athletes have a very busy schedule. They won the state championship back, was that early November? We invited them to the November meeting, but they were busy hosting a fundraiser. And then in December, the school district was recognizing the team on our council meeting. So I'm glad that we're finally able to get you here to kick off 2025. Many of you were here with us the end of last spring for the girls track state championship. So we're expecting big things this spring as well. And wish you the best of luck in that, and hope that we can invite you back again soon. So congratulations. Mayor Pro Tem, maybe we can do a photo here. right, we will now move on to our public comment section. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on matters of importance to the town where there is not otherwise an opportunity to speak on the agenda. It looks like I have one person signed up for public comment today, so I will invite Clarence Sitzman to join us. Sitzman, good evening.
Hello.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. I own the property on 4101 Kern Street. If anybody knows that, I have a couple buildings in back that I say were up on the honor system. They were ready to fall down, so I was in the process of taking them down. I had a dumpster, one of the roll-off dumpsters come out there. As a 5-year-old, I filled the thing myself in 2 days. That got hauled away. In the morning, I met Republic Service on the morning it was hauled. And somebody overnight had dumped a big couch on my dumpster. Unfortunately, I was told by Republic that if there was anything over the top of that, I would have an extra $200 fine for that. So I removed the couch, put it just in the street there, and then Republic came and took that away and then brought me another one for tearing down the other building. I didn't know it at the time, but I filled it, and I was filling it up actually on the next Tuesday. And I got what happened on Tuesday morning is someone from Safehold had come there and took a picture of that and said that I was, and I have a thing here that says that I was in violation of safety code and that sort of thing. And again, the next day on Wednesday, and I didn't know this at the time, okay, so I didn't know this, but he took a picture on 5th. The next day, on Wednesday, I had the dumpster removed again. I had it filled up again, and the couch was sitting in the middle of the street. So I went to the town hall over here and talked to a nice lady named Shannon over here, and she says, "Well, that's not right. That's not your job to do." So she gave me the names of Cody and Chad, and I called at 9:52 on that Wednesday morning for Cody. And I got his voicemail. I called Chad the next minute at 9:53. And he says, "No, that's not your problem. We'll take care of that." And I got a call back at 11:30 but from Chad, and I assume this is the Chad that I was talking to. Maybe not another Chad. Okay, but I never met either of these people. But I got a call back at 9:53 and said the problem had been taken care of. So first of all, kudos to Chad and Cody who were doing that. To take care of that in an hour and a half, I thought was really tremendous. Thought everything was taken care of until I got this notice of violation on Monday night. The letterhead said that it was shipped out, it was sent to me at 5 o'clock on Friday night. And so we get our mail, I live in Vista Bonita, we get our mail at 5:30. So I didn't know anything about this violation until 5:30. And then that was on the 9th that I got this. And I had to correct this violation by the 10th. The next day I had hours to correct what it took him 6 days to get me for a notification. I thought it was pretty ridiculous, the fines, $100 for the first day, $300 for the second day, $1,000 for the third day, and then I could be summoned to court. And then I was threatened with $2,650 per violation, and they could count each day a separate violation. So I was basically threatened with $12,000 worth of fines on this. I was obviously a little bit upset by that, so I tried to call Cameron then that day, on Monday night. Well, it was on Tuesday morning, because, yeah, it was past 5 o'clock when I got it. And I called Cameron the next morning at about 9 in the morning. I got his voicemail, and I told him I wanted to talk to him about this. I didn't hear back from him. I called him again at 4 o'clock. I still didn't hear back from him. I let the next day go. I figured, okay, I'll give him a chance to call. He never called again. I called him again then on Thursday, the next day, and so I left 3 messages for him to give me a call, and I never got a call back from him. So I mean, that's the kind of the quick version of what was going on here. You can probably tell I'm really very pissed off at this sort of thing here. I have a few questions for the town board here. Number one, why is Safe Built involved with this sort of thing about streets? This has nothing to do with building safety, if that's what they're up to. They're obviously not responsive to their citizens after being called 3 times. They never did call me back. And obviously, they're not nimble enough to respond to if this is a real safety hazard that would require $12,000 in fines. Why did it take them 6 days for me to get this notice? So Safe Build I'm very against Safe Build. I think the town can do better than that. And I don't know if you know what sort of agreements you have with them, but I am not happy at all with what they've done. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Sitzman. Appreciate you sharing your experience with us. Mr. Robinson and Mr. Stone are here. They're both directors here at the town. My guess is maybe one of those can get in touch with you and help answer some of your questions. But
Okay.
we appreciate you sharing with us tonight. Thank
Do
you.
you need my number? Anyone that need my number? If you're going to get a hold of me?
Yeah, if you want to, my business card's out in the lobby. Just go ahead and grab them. You can shoot me an email, and I can set something up to talk to you. I'm Robinson, the Community Development Director.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I have one other individual signed up, but that is to speak on a later agenda item. So before we move on, I'd ask, is there anybody else present that would like to address the council for public comment? All right. Seeing none, we'll then move on to the consent agenda. This evening, the consent agenda has 5 items. The first is approval of the November 12th, 2024 Special Town Council meeting minutes. Second is approval of the December 10th, 2024 Town Council meeting minutes. Third is Resolution 1, Series 2025, a resolution approving administrative matters for the town of Timnath. In summary, those are matters that we need to pass at the beginning of each year to just make certain appointments for the town. We have Resolution number 2, Series 2025, a resolution approving the purchase of a Kubota utility task vehicle from Wickman Tractor Company. And finally, Resolution number 3, Series 2025, a resolution approving the purchase of a 2025 Jeep Grand Cherokee from Polo Dodge Chrysler Jeep. Council members, are there any requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none at this time, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
No, good. All those in favor of approving consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The resolution or the consent agenda is approved 3-0. Let's now move on to mayor and council reports. Councilmember Jenkins, anything to share?
Get my microphone on. I've been kind of busy at the beginning of the year with the I-25 Coalition meeting, the NFR, the Northern Front Range Metropolitan Planning Organization. There's actually quite a bit going on there. And then on Monday of this week, I attended the Larimer County Behavioral Health Policy Council, and they're responsible for approving or recommending to Larimer County commissioners the grants for behavioral health, of which there's $2.8 million each year that's allocated for a variety of behavioral health grants. And there's actually quite a bit going on with the Longview facility out on Tilby, and some good news coming. I don't want to announce it yet because it's not official yet, but in April we should have some real good news to announce. There was some expansion going on. So let's see, one other thing, there was $1 million approved in grant money for the Mulberry I-25 design for a new interchange there. That's, which does affect residents of Timnath. We often use that as a means to get into Fort Collins. It's a very dangerous area. There have been, I believe, in the last year and a half, there have been several fatalities there, pedestrians. It's a dangerous intersection, and so it's good to see that there's money allocated for a full design, but not money yet for construction, which would probably be around 20 million. So, but step by step.
Okay.
That's my update.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem.
First, I'd like to thank the town of Wellington for coming out and speaking at the Old Town Committee. They came out and kind of gave us an ideas on the how they set up their downtown Main Street program. So I really appreciated them coming out and speaking to us. I don't want to steal your thunder, Lisa. Are you out there? Do you want to come out? Do you want to come up to the microphone and kind of speak about GFOA?
Sure. I'm proud to say that we were awarded the GFOA Certificates in Excellence for Financial Reporting on our 2023 audit. So Bonnie Dennis really led that effort on our accounting team, and we should be getting a plaque, and I'd like to invite the whole accounting team out once we get that and do a little recognition for them. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The only update I have is Chief Jones has decided that he's going to retire in May, and so we have started the process of recruiting our next police chief. There was a public forum held tonight before this meeting. I appreciate everyone that came out and attended that and shared their thoughts. There will certainly be more opportunities for public participation as that process continues. We did push out some messaging to allow anyone that has thoughts to submit their thoughts to us. So I really encourage the community to stay involved as we select our next police chief. Staff, anything urgent and updates before we move on? We will now move on to our public hearings. We have one public hearing this evening. Kind of how these work is after I call the item, our staff will give a presentation, and then the applicant will give a presentation. Following that, there's an opportunity for public comment for anyone that would like to speak on the matter. Staff will then ask questions of staff and the applicant. Once there's a motion before council, council will then discuss the matter and ultimately vote. So our first and only public hearing this evening is for ordinance number 1, series 2025, an ordinance approving the Ladera Plan Development Overlay Amendment number 2. Mr. Kemper.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As you just mentioned, item 7A is a Plan Development District application which is amending the Ladera PD overlay. The applicant and owners are both Connell LLC, represented tonight by Grant Nelson and Steve Weens. So in accordance with Table 2.1 of the town's land use code for hearings and notice requirements, a plan development district is required, a public hearing before both the Planning Commission for recommendation and Town Council for approval. Planning Commission recommended approval of this overlay amendment by unanimous vote of 5-0 at their December 3rd, 2024 meeting. In addition, the site was properly noticed as required by this code. So physical notice posted on the property, letters to the surrounding property owners, and a hearing notice was published within the Coloradan. So a plan development district essentially follows the same sequential order of a rezoning in the town as these overlays accompany the base zoning and then ultimately govern the future development of that property or property. So this is where we're at within the development review process. Subsequent developments that are within the planning area of this application would then follow these regulations if approved. Again, this is the second amendment to the original plan development overlay within Ladera. The initial was approved in October of 2021, was then again amended and approved in June of 2023. Properties that are related to this application is the Ladera second filing, which was approved in February of 2024, and then the Ladera third filing, which is a minor subdivision. That is currently in review. However, we'll talk about that more, but one of these items is related to that third filing. The proposed amendment to the PD overlay is seeking to modify two sections of the land use code, one related to building height, the other to building materials. The first modification involves an exception to the building height limit for Lot 4, Block 1 of the Ladera subdivision filing number 3, which is under review, as I mentioned. The proposed height exception would increase the limit from 40 feet to 46 feet for the building and up to 65 feet for architectural elements such as entry features. While the specific user of the site may not be disclosed at this time, this request change is intended to accommodate potential retail users who require taller structures for business operations, such as higher ceilings or a unique architectural design. The second proposed change allows for the use of metal materials for up to 50% of the building elevations in all of filings 2 and 3 of the Ladera subdivision, where metal is currently prohibited in all zoning districts except for in industrial as a primary material. This modification is aiming to provide more flexibility within building design of the Ladera subdivision and ensure that an aesthetic quality of the development is maintained and unified. So as a reminder, a plan development district is a discretionary approval by town council. The process for unified developments permits greater flexibility in the application of the standards. In addition to the technical criteria in the town's comprehensive plan, it is reviewed against criteria of section 2914 of the land use code surrounding plan development districts. Those items that you guys will be reviewing this application against are as such that the district shall have a unified character throughout the district, and that it shall have no more adverse effects on health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding properties, or shall be no more injurious to property or improvements in the area than what other use generally permitted in the same district. 2, that adequate utilities shall be provided. 3, the proposed plan development district does not substantially impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property. 4, no significant traffic issues are created. And 5, that the district results in a more efficient development which may contain innovative and creative developments. So looking at where these properties lie, the subject property is located south of and adjacent to the Sweatsville Zoo Road, and it is abutting the Weitzel Street to both the east and the west. So this is currently what is known as Ladera second filing right now. The subject property is zoned regional commercial with the PD overlay as mentioned, aligning with the future land use designation of employment regional commercial. So getting into the actual request, the language that is being proposed within this amendment, the existing code requirement for building height in the regional commercial zone district is permitting 40 feet. The proposal would be 46 feet is allowed for the entirety of the lot, and entry features and other architectural elements shall not exceed 65 feet. Those conditions, again, are only applicable for the use of Lot 4, Block 1 in the Ladera subdivision filing number 3. I understand it's a little difficult to see this based on the color of the map. However, this block here is where the third filing of the minor subdivision will occur, and there is proposed to be a lot at the south west corner of that property adjacent to I-25. That is where the subject property is for the height exception. The existing requirement for building materials is that no metal surfaces or flat-faced cement block shall be visible upon the exterior of any building as a primary surface material. The applicant has requested that this language, however, architectural metal wall panels and roofing materials are encouraged to be used as accent materials to enhance the architectural design elements and curb appeal. Weathering steel, corrosion-resistant steel, and factory-applied finishes are allowed, but may not exceed 50% of the visible exterior enclosure of the roof surface area. Just some key points and thoughts that I think would be beneficial for the council. One is how building height is measured within the town's land use code. So it is measured from the average or finished grade at the center of all walls and buildings, either to the top of the parapet or highest roof beam, whichever is higher, so that's a flat or a shed roof, to the top of the parapet or deck level, whichever higher, in the average distance between the highest ridge and its eave of a gable, hip, or gambrel roof. So that, just so for some understanding, that is how we are defining our building height within the town currently. I just also wanted to point out that within the town's land use code, there is a height exception, which allows for an applicant to apply for a 15% increase in their maximum building height. That is where the number 46 came from within the requirement of the overlay request here, as 15% of 40 would be the 46, so that's where that number was derived from. Some other key points to note is that within the Harmony Corridor design standards, we do allow or permit metal siding as a secondary material, and that was established to be at a maximum of 45%. So it is in line somewhat with what is existing within the Harmony Core, and I think it gives a good example of how metal could be utilized within a development and could be tastefully done. There is metal siding that is implemented within the Riverbend subdivision as well, for just clarification. And then lastly, that the Ladera subdivision Phase 2 PD overlay, which was approved in 2024, has this exact same language for the entirety of that second phase. So the intent was to, again, have a cohesive element that would span across the entirety of the Ladera development. So staff has reviewed the request against the comprehensive plan land use code, and has determined that the application is consistent with the following criteria in the code. We feel that the overlay will not result in an adverse impact on the health and safety. The area surrounding the property is designated for regional commercial and employment regional commercial in the comprehensive plan. So that's intended to accommodate commercial, retail, and entertainment uses. So we think that it aligns with those uses and does not further preclude any development within that. Regarding the building materials, again, it is intended to promote a more cohesive design. So we do feel that it is increasing that the unified nature of that request, meeting that requirement. We will be reviewing the building materials as they come through. The applicant team has actually offered staff the ability to review against their design review criteria, so that we as staff and the applicants are in line, and that there's not two competing requirements within that could trip us up within the review process. So that would be something that we look at to ensure that these metal materials are still meeting the intents and character of the surrounding properties. And then the request for the building height, we do feel that if there was a request, we would prefer that from a planning perspective that be unified throughout the development, to where flexibility to others to also have this ability for building height exceptions. However, understood that may be an ask. So given the location of this site, we felt that it was appropriate permitting this height exception within that lot. And we do not feel that would have any negative impacts to the surrounding properties of commercial users. All the adequate utilities will be provided. Either there are some existing now within the second filing, or they will be continued on with the future development of the site. This was reviewed against the referral agencies, water, sewer, all of those districts. Had no concerns at this time. It does not substantially impair the appropriate use of the development adjacent. As I mentioned, the surrounding properties are developed as retail establishments or employee regional commercial. It should not hinder the development. It actually might promote flexibility in the building design within those building materials. And then no significant traffic issues are created. Those will be reviewed at the time of site plan or development proposals and go through the process accordingly. And then lastly, that a more efficient development, we do believe that this would allow greater flexibility within design for the development team. It would also optimize the development review and further align the town with what is being proposed within the Ladera Design Review Committee and create a bit of a more adaptable development, allowing for greater use of materials or design intent. With that, I will turn it over to Steve, and he will give you a little bit more information on the proposal. Sorry, Grant.
You can call me Steve if you want to. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of Council. Grant Nelson, Republic Investment Group, on behalf of Ladera. Chad outlined the quick two changes to the plan development overlay that we're seeking here tonight. The display on the left is the elevations of the specific building that we're looking for the modification for. It's a two-story, 100,000 square foot retailer. This request is very specific to this one retailer. That is their prototype height. It's 44 foot 8 inches. There's the base building. As you can see, the two below show a clear story. They're actually at 55 feet. They have a clear story in the middle of the building to allow light that comes in. And then the entry feature is one that goes all the way up to 63 feet. So for a two-story building, it's actually not extraordinarily tall. But as Chad mentioned, this is a good land use. Doing two-story retail allows better use of the land and allows them to stack their sporting goods on top of one another. So then the second sheet, Chad, shows the metal siding, the weathered steel or corten steel. And as Chad mentioned, so we have a design guidelines within Ladera and a design review committee. We've invited staff and Chad to be part of the committee so that when we see these elevations come in, we can kind of coordinate on, as he said, and we think it allows for better coordination and communication between the staff and the applicant. We've had a number of good meetings today with both planning and engineering. The new staff is great. We really appreciate working with them and the communicative nature of how they work with us. And here with Steve Weens and our partners if you need or have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Appreciate that. Mr. Kemper, anything else before we solicit public comment?
Nothing else to add, sorry.
Okay. This is now time for public comment. Nobody is signed up, but I will ask now, is there anyone present that would like to comment on this proposal? Seeing none, then I will turn to council for questions.
I'm just curious, why 50% as opposed to 45%, which was already in the Harmony standards? I mean, I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other, but it just...
It's how we wrote the design guideline 3 or 4 years ago to be up to 50%. And more than likely, no one's going to go above 50%. And part of the benefit of having Chad and the staff on the design review with us is if someone comes in with 50% and it looks off, we can advise them to reduce that down. So,
yeah. I mean, what's been done so far in the Harmony corridor with the metal looks great. So,
Yeah, I think the Core 10 steel will really add, and we're hoping everyone can incorporate it into the building, so it's the theme throughout the whole project.
yeah, and it does kind of fit with at least part of the Riverbend stuff as well, which I've heard really good comments.
And along those lines, you're kind of touched on this. So, was it discussed along these lines instead of a PD overlay? Was there any other tools or adjustments that could have achieved the same goal, or is this the best tool that the town and the developer decided to move forward with?
Yeah, so we certainly discussed every avenue possible in order to move forward with the request that the applicant had proposed. Based on the proposal, this was the only mechanism at the time, based on our land use code and mechanisms in place, to request this for approval, discretionary approval by the town council.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chad.
The clear story, as it was described, a total height of 55 feet.
Correct.
How is it, apparently we might be defining that as an architectural element and not a building height. Can you
Correct.
talk about that interpretation?
Yeah, as it didn't actually function as the primary use of the building, it is there strictly to provide additional light as a requirement for building code or other features. So we did put that under the umbrella as architectural feature. We did leave it broad, but if there's a request to define that further, I think staff would be willing to discuss that. However, we didn't really want to get into the design of the building itself, so we try to leave it as broad as possible. And the architectural features would be outside of the element of actually servicing within the building itself, as in square footage for the use itself.
Okay. Is it possible to pull up one of the maps? And I want to understand the proposal as far as the architectural element that I assume is essentially branding. As I looked at the sketch.
Oh, that one, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that top one, the front elevation, on the lot there, where is the front intended to be?
That would be facing south within the lot.
Okay. So if it's facing the south, if you are on County Road 5, your view would essentially be the side elevation, the second one down, or the third one down, right?
From County Road 5, yes, it would be this elevation here.
Okay, so it would be relatively skinny as opposed to the entire third or whatever the building that design element is?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it does limit the impact based on that orientation.
Council, any other questions?
Other than the other element that's 55, bringing more light in, seems like that that would result in more efficient energy usage, less lighting required on the interior of the building. So that's actually a nice feature.
Chad, are you aware, have we anywhere else provided an exception for design elements to extend above and beyond the building height?
I believe this would be the first.
All right. Council, anything else? All right. At this time, is there a motion?
I move to approve ordinance number 1, series 2025, an ordinance approving the Ladera planned development overlay, amendment number 2.
And I'll second it.
All right. It's probably moved and seconded. We will now engage in discussion, beginning, Mayor Pro Tem, it's your motion.
Yeah. I'm in support of this plan development overlay amendment. I think this height increase is a reasonable request, really, that for the regional commercial growth of the community. So I think in the area where it's at, I think it's a reasonable request. Aligns with our growth goals of the community within this regional commercial. Additionally, I trust that the staff will closely monitor and enforce this compliance with all the conditions. Really, and I trust that that this project will meet our high standards and serve the best interests of Timnath. So that's why I'm going to be in support of this plan development overlay amendment.
Yeah.
Councilor Jenkins.
Yeah, I'm in favor of both of these modifications. I think the changes in the use of the metal elements make sense. We've begun using them elsewhere in the Harmony Corridor. It'd be nice if they were both aligned to 50%, but that's pretty minor. And I like the fact that they're talking about having it be sort of a unifying design theme across the entire Ladera development. So that's good. And as far as the height goes, we're talking about a very large retail sports complex really here. And so I think what they're trying to do is going to be pretty exciting for the town of Timnath. And I think the proposed heights are very reasonable given the size of this building. So I'm in support of it.
Our code does allow for a 15% variance, and if that were the only thing to be considered, I think that could have come before us as a specific, site-specific request without the need for a PD overlay. And I suppose my preference would have been to have done that, to evaluate this specific use for a specific project as opposed to completely modifying the rules for this lot. However, it is within the 15%. I think had it come before us in that way, we likely would have approved it. My hope and expectation is that we will not then see a request to add a 15% modification to the modification that we just made. I'm assuming that's not what's in the works. I am a little concerned about opening the door to creative architectural elements. In all candor, I think the clear story is a roof, and I think it's part of a building. But I won't belabor that point, but that does sound a bit creative to me. We are opening the door on this sign, and I would not be shocked if we see other commercial development wanting the same treatment in the future. Some things that relieve that concern for me in this case is first the fact that that lot does sit 8 feet below the interstate and that it is a low point on the Ladera development. And so I think the 65 feet starting in that depression, if you will, is different than 65 feet on a hill. So I think the impact is less. Also, the orientation of the proposed branding, the fact that the side view from County Road 5, that visual impact is minimized, alleviates some of my concerns there. I might view this differently if the request was for 65 feet running parallel to I-25 there. So with those concerns noted, ultimately I believe it's in the best interest of the town to support this. As mentioned, this is a 104,000 foot retailer. And I believe Mr. Nelson discussed that this modification allows for the stacking of sporting goods. So we could speculate as to what might be coming in there, but that does feel like an amenity that would be good for the town, and so I will support it. Council, any more comment? Okay. With that, all those in favor of Ordinance 7A, Series 2025, an ordinance approving the Ladera Plan Development Overlay Amendment 2, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, the PD overlay amendment passes 3-0. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Thank you, Mr. Kemper. We will now move on to our regular business items, beginning with resolution number 4, series 2025, a resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Timnath and Fisher Farm Metropolitan District number 1 regarding limited authorization to exercise eminent domain. I will note, because this agenda item will potentially, would impact a specific landowner. In addition to hearing from the staff report, the Metro District, if they care to speak, I will also ask to hear from the impacted landowner. With that, Ms. Steffel.
Thank you. And as to that procedural item, first of all, the developer has also asked for an equal opportunity to respond as the property owner is provided in case they need to provide any responses. So we've got the attorney for the Metropolitan District here. I believe we have a representative of one of the property owners, and we also have representatives of the developer as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chad, are you able to pull up this is my first PowerPoint to you guys, so we'll see how this works. Okay, so just as you all know, town's role for metropolitan districts within the boundaries of the town is that the town approves a service plan for the metropolitan districts. At that point, after organization, the metropolitan district is an independent government and only comes back to the town when approval is required under the service plan, or they need to amend the service plan, or other very limited circumstances. But this is one of those circumstances. So we are approached by Fisher Farm Metropolitan District number 1, and they are requesting an IJ with the town to allow them to exercise the power of eminent domain. They were, Fisher Farms was organized. I don't know how to make it go. Oh, okay. And my font is too small, so I'll fix that next time. Okay, so basically as background, Fisher Farms Metropolitan District was organized in 2021, is that right? Okay, and at that time, there was a provision in the service plan, which is also in your model service plan, that states that the district may not exercise the power of eminent domain without entering into a written agreement with the town. And so they're before the town for that request. This is the second time the town has received a request for approval of allowing a special district to exercise eminent domain. So this is only the second time that you've heard a request like this. And what they are requesting is specifically to exercise eminent domain to acquire easements for the purposes of constructing an under drain system. And they're planning to drain the property within the boundaries of the Metropolitan District and then convey that water to the Poudre River system through a series of pipes. So they need the easement for the off-site pipes. And the original service plan did contemplate that those off-site pipes could be public improvements that were financed by the district, and even had an exhibit showing those off-site pipes. Okay, so status of the development. The development has had approval of final plat, but development has been stalled since that time, and the plat has actually not been recorded because I believe the last element that needs to be completed to record the plat is acquisition of an easement for the underdrain. And so until that requirement was met, the plat could not be recorded. The plat also has language on it saying that the public improvements must be constructed before the land can either be conveyed or a building permit can be issued. And at this point, there's a gap where between the public right-of-way and existing easements where the developer has not acquired an easement. Let's see. Okay, so this is the map. And if you can see on here, this shows the entire proposed length of the underdrain. And you see the Fisher Farms property is labeled in the northwest. The line, and then so the line is proposed to run down Main Street and then go through land that's owned by, we call it the Lorson South land. It is owned by a separate corporation, but they are a related entity to Fisher Farms. So the developer is not going to have a problem getting an easement through that property. It goes through that property, and then it goes down. The proposal is to go through property that's owned by the Hall, and then it's going to go back through public right-of-way for a short period of time, and then on to property owned by the town of Timnath. The easement has been already acquired from the town of Timnath. So the only gap that's missing is this portion through the Hall property where neither the developer nor the Metropolitan District have an easement. So what they're asking for is the right to use eminent domain to acquire an easement through that piece of property. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so the Metropolitan District has asked for an IGA to be able to acquire this property, and the town has not adopted standards because this is only the second time that you've seen a request like this. So what town staff did on the recommendation of your then town attorney, Justin Stone, was to look at what one of your neighbors had adopted, the town of Loveland, specifically for when Loveland exercises their own rights of eminent domain. And the reason why we felt that that was an appropriate place to look was because the town of Timnath has adopted the Loveland version of the Lucas standards. So even though your town land use code does not specifically set forth any requirements or standards or criteria for evaluating when a metropolitan district can use eminent domain, we have adopted other standards that were adopted by Loveland. So we did look at those as analogous. And then in the packet, you will see that the president of the Metropolitan District has submitted an affidavit that goes through those 4 criteria that we have to set forth why they believe that those criteria have been met for establishing for allowing the use of eminent domain. So as I mentioned, those are not firm requirements, but they are recommended considerations for considering whether to allow this. So the first one is whether there's sufficient public purpose to justify the acquisition by eminent domain. And as I've explained, the public improvements that the district contemplated construction cannot currently be constructed without acquisition of an easement across this or other property. Secondly, the eminent domain procedures are not being commenced primarily to advance a private interest or private use. Well, the contemplation is that this underdrain will drain this entire Fisher Farm property, will benefit all of those future residents in that development, and that is identified as a public improvement under the service plan for construction of that underdrain that was contemplated to be constructed by the Metropolitan District. It may also serve other developments as well. During the development process, the town engineers at that time, which were TST by contract in downtown Toronto required a drainage study to be performed of both the Fisher Farms property and at least 2 other adjacent properties, including the Countryside Estates property, to make sure that the underdrain was sized sufficiently to allow the flow of that property. I understand from Don Toronto that the system didn't have to be oversized. I think my mom might have said it was oversized in my staff report. It was not oversized, but it was sized sufficiently to allow that conveyance of property. And the reason is because when Fisher Farms is first drained, it's going to have a larger volume of flow, but after the initial draining, then the ongoing drain is going to be much lower and would allow for other properties to connect. So it was always contemplated that there would be a reimbursement agreement and that other property owners would be allowed to connect to that underdrain, at least from the town's perspective. Third, that the developer has considered and presented to the town alternative designs for the project to alleviate or minimize the need for the proposed easement or right-of-way. The town engineers, I believe, did work with the property owner to evaluate different options. This option was the lowest cost option because they were able to run the pipeline for the longest period of time through their own property, as opposed to needing to put more of it within public right-of-way and to have to construct under the road and rip up the road for a longer period of time. Then the improvements for which the easements or right-of-ways are needed will be utilized by more than one person, partnership, or entity, and are necessary for the proposed development with existing infrastructure. And this would be used by all of those future homeowners and is necessary infrastructure. Finally, that the developer has entered into an agreement with the town, satisfactory in form and substance to the town manager and town attorney, that sets forth the parties' respective rights and obligations related to the eminent domain proceedings, including without limitation a provision obligating the developer to pay all costs of property acquisition, including the town's costs related to said proceedings. Okay, sorry, that's long. Anyway, so you have an affidavit from the president of the Metropolitan District standing forth why he believes that each of those criteria have been met, and also setting forth that they have been using good faith efforts for the last 3 years to try to acquire this easement through purchase. The reason why they can't acquire it through purchase is because there is the Halls, my understanding is that they already have a number of easements on their property and understandably don't want to be burdened by another parallel easement, including there is already an easement for an underdrain that was originally conveyed to Allison Estates, and then now is the successor in interest is Countryside Estates LLC. And that is an underdrain easement. So what the developer of Fisher Farms did was try to acquire that existing easement from the developer of Countryside Estates. They were not able to reach an agreement. And, they can, I think the owner of Countryside Estates, the principal, is going to be able to explain his position of their negotiations. In fact, Jason Martindale from Countryside Estates also submitted a letter in writing to the town council that's been provided to you, and a number of exhibits that has also been provided to you last Friday, so you've had it for several days, explaining his situation where he does not feel that those negotiations went well or were fair, and has a lot of concern about that. So the biggest concern, my understanding is that the biggest concern is whether, if the underdrain is constructed by Fisher Farms, whether Countryside Estates will be able to connect to that underdrain in the future. Can you go back one? Okay, so Countryside Estates is, thank you, right there. So they originally acquired the easement over the Hall's property for the underdrain, thinking they'd eventually need it to drain their property. And then they want to keep that, and they have not been able to negotiate a reimbursement agreement that would eventually allow connection to the underdrain. So in our IGA, one of the things that we put in was we put in some requirements that the Metropolitan District would have to own and maintain this underdrain, so it's a public improvement, that they would have to allow other neighbors to connect, neighboring property owners to connect that needed an underdrain, provided some reasonable conditions, that the Metropolitan District had to be able to review the plans that could not be unconditionally withheld, that they are unreasonably denied for approval, that they had to have capacity in the line for the proposed connector, and that the connector would have to pay their proportionate share of the cost to design and build the under drain. And the agreement before you does not define what proportionate share of the under drain is. We had a number of back and forths in the last couple of weeks about what that is, but it does allow that reimbursement agreement would be subject to approval by the town engineer. So the town engineer will be able to work with the two property owners to come up with a reasonable and standard reimbursement agreement for those costs upon connection of another future landowner. The IGA also provides that all the town's costs would be reimbursed, and the Metropolitan District would have to go through standard eminent domain procedures to condemn the property, which includes payment of a fair market value of the property. It requires a good faith offer of before they can even commence the eminent domain proceedings, and then requires judicial determination of what that the reasonable value of that property is, and does require reimbursement to the underlying property owners. So the Metropolitan District wants to condemn the existing easement that's now held by Countryside Estates, the under drain, as well as an easement that over the same piece of property from the Halls, because that allows them to have different terms and conditions in their easement, and that would be a non-exclusive easement, and a condition, a temporary construction easement next to that existing easement.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a representative from Fisher Farms available. We have a representative from Countryside Estates, Mr. Martindale, available. Do we have anyone from the Hall property available?
And then you also have someone from the Metropolitan District as well, their attorney, David O'Leary.
Okay. And so when we say the Metropolitan District, it's the Fisher Farm Metropolitan District. Okay. Very good. Sir, welcome.
Hello, my name is David O'Leary.
David O'Leary?
Yes, O'Leary.
Thank you, sir.
And I represent the Metropolitan District. Wanted to add a couple points for clarification as well. This one. Does this work now? All right. So the property was obtained a number of years before. It was actually annexed about 4 years before the service plan was approved. And their requirement initially was a preliminary plat before they could do a special district, but they were required to do a final plat before they were allowed to do the metro district. So it took them about 4 years to get the service plan approved by the town. It was submitted a couple different times in a couple different variations, but once Carolyn came online as temporary town attorney, we had the transition from Mr. Rogers. She assisted in getting that service plan approved. So it had been in 3 or 4 different iterations for about a 4-year process before that service plan was approved. Within that service plan as well, there are costs and expenses of all the on-site and off-site improvements, including the under drain, were included. And maps and legal descriptions, as well as concept drawings, were included that included some of the off-sites, including the under drain and drainage issues. So some of those pieces of information were concept, but they were included in that original service plan approval, as well as the town IGA that was executed with the town and the district upon formation. So this under drain and the drainage issues were contemplated even back then. Typically with service plans, those are conceptual in nature, unless and until you get to the subdivision improvement agreements and the actual approvals of the construction of those improvements with the town. Those usually come later. From a service plan perspective, they're doing cost estimates, preliminary designs, and then default to whatever the approved development plans would be for the development. So those negotiations were going on for all of the improvements for years prior to the formation of the district. Once the district was formed, and without the district, a lot of this wouldn't have been available or possible or feasible. It's just from an economic standpoint. The under drain and the negotiations have been going on since 2021. We do have developer attorneys here as well from Fox Rothschild who can speak to timeline information, exchanges, negotiations with Countryside Estates. But that under drain and a variety of iterations of a variety of different agreements, as you've seen in the materials submitted by Countryside Estates, were negotiated, exchanged. They did have an attorney at one point in time. Brad March was representing them, who was also a former town attorney. He did negotiate and help with some of those agreements, but none of those agreements were ever executed. So over the course of the last 3 years, they've been attempting in good faith to negotiate those agreements to try to come up with a solution. The existing easement that they do have through the Halls property was obtained and existing since 2002, and nothing's been done with that easement since 2002, and no development has occurred in Countryside Estates. We've been stalled from a Fisher Farms perspective on the development because the plat can't be approved until all the easements, including this offsite drainage issue and the under drain, is resolved. So this is the last piece. All the development plans and all the approvals, all of the engineering diagrams and construction plans have been negotiated. All of those things are ready to go. I think preliminary plat, final plat are ready, and we've just been waiting for, like Carolyn had indicated, for over a year, maybe two, to get the final easement. So those have been attempted to be negotiated. We're just here now because we don't have any other alternative. With regard to those offers and those letters that you've seen, they attempted to negotiate, but from a Metro District standpoint, the Metro District doesn't come in to play on an eminent domain basis without the consent of the town, one. And two, without a reasonable offer. So we went out and obtained an appraisal. So THK, which does appraisals on different land and valuations, went out and did appraisals on each of the Hall and the Countryside Estates properties. Those were provided in separate letters to each of those landowners, along with an offer to try to purchase after all the negotiations between the development entities, the landowners, had failed. The district came in and made those offers with a design, engineering, appraisal, and offer letters to consider. Those were only used as a last resort, and now here because we don't have any other alternative, and they're basically blocking the ability to develop this property without that easement. So as far as a background, we can discuss any of the other pieces or parts, and we do have people who can talk about timelines, but just wanted the town to understand there has been a history. It has been attempted to be negotiated. It is it's a last resort. The easement that they're trying to condemn is an existing easement where the property had contemplated an under drain and a drainage anyway. And it's a two-part easement. So typically when you're constructing improvements, there's a construction easement which is wider. And when you're done constructing it, the non-exclusive permanent easement is just what's necessary for the pipeline and setbacks. So for construction purposes, there's always a wider area that's needed to construct. All the land is returned back, to the surface to the extent that it's able, and the final non-exclusive permanent easement will cover just what that pipe is and the appropriate setbacks. They did negotiate and were offering the ability of surrounding property owners to tie in. And Carolyn and I have worked in other jurisdictions on different things with regard to cost sharing and adjustments of this nature. The conditions that she had placed into that IGA, in addition to the examples that we had from Loveland that we've actually used in Loveland, those conditions and requirements for determining what the flow is and what their usage is, proportionate share of the flow requirement, operation and maintenance of that, and at the time of connection. So those costs aren't incurred by the connecting in property owner unless and until they connect it. So all those are determined at the time, but Fisher Farms is willing to go and construct everything, and only when that person connects in or ties in would those costs and expenses be incurred. Typically, at the time of connection, those are negotiated, and we are perfectly fine with running that by the town engineer to help us determine what's fair and reasonable. So we just want, with regard to the easement, we just want something that's customary and appropriate and reasonable to all parties. So as long as everyone's paying their fair share of the costs and expenses, we're fine with people paying it, as long as we're following the rules. I think the standards that have been set forward by the town and the IGAs that have been negotiated are fair and reasonable, and both the town attorney and our developer attorney and myself have all agreed that that's fair and reasonable, and we're comfortable with the IGAs as presented to the town. Just wanted to thank town staff and council for their cooperation and assistance in getting us to here. I'm available to answer any other questions. We also have a developer representative here as well, if you need to ask any questions on timeline or information or any of those kinds of things.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. I appreciate it. I'll now invite Mr. Martindale to the microphone. Mr. Martindale, we did receive your multi-page letter there and some attachments, so thank you for providing that. I know each of the council members and myself have reviewed those, but we open the floor to you.
Good evening. I hope everyone had time to review the information exhibits I submitted prior to this meeting. Obviously, this is not a simple case or a quick resolution, but a very rare and sensitive topic. My name is Jason Martindale. My occupation is full-time farmer and owner of Allison Estates and Countryside Estates, 112 plus or minus plotted subdivision. For the record, I am not, nor have I ever been opposed to Fisher Farm development using an existing easement that was granted and dedicated to Allison Estates for an under-drain system on the Halls property. The issue has always been reaching a fair repay agreement for the use of the easement in exchange for Fisher Farm to install and construct their own under-drain system. We are here tonight to discuss the motion of eminent domain on easements granted to Allison Estates in 2002 and later in 2022 easements to Countryside Estates on the Halls property. I am requesting the town deny the authorization to exercise eminent domain. The Metro District has not met the criteria set forth in this agenda to exercise the condemnation of an easement for the Metro District. This procedure does not meet the factors set forth in A, B, and D on page 4, and in fact contradicts the purpose of the eminent domain. According to the summary on this agenda, it states, as a governmental entity, the district is authorized under Colorado Revised Statute 32-1-1004 to exercise the power of eminent domain for the purpose of providing public sanitation improvements, including storm sewer improvements, unless limited under its service plan. This is stating eminent domain power for sanitation improvements for public improvements, not for an underdrain system to move groundwater. Yes, groundwater. That is water located under the ground. It also states for storm sewer improvements, not storm water. Storm water is defined as surface water that flows down driveways and streets and into the gutters that collects into storm drains, which move swiftly into culverts, drainage ditches, sewers, and detention ponds. The developers will be required to construct detention ponds on the property for stormwater. There is already a recorded easement, reception number 20000069617, in place on the Halls property for box elder to service 7,000 homes that was granted in 2000 and runs parallel to the easement for the underdrain for Allison and Countryside Estates. Furthermore, on page 2 of this agenda, the developer states Fisher Farms developer purchased an easement from the property owners for a sanitary sewer. So it appears there is already 2 easements in place to serve the public for sanitation purposes. This contradicts A on page 4 of this agenda. They are misleading the council and public to believe this. In truth, they need the easement to advance a private interest or private use for the development to maximize their profits. This contradicts B on page 4 of this agenda. If they can install an underdrain system and dewater their site, they could create a subdivision with the ability to install basements. This increases the value of the lots in each home by $60,000 to $80,000 per home times 1,000 homes, which is their numbers. This would increase profit margins of $60 to $80 million. The developer has always stated and taken the position they do not need an underdrain system for their development. As part of a repay agreement, Fisher's Farms sent me on November 21st, 2022, which I submitted as Exhibit F, the developer, or Lorson South, wouldn't need the underdrain for the project. In fact, and I quote, Lorson South is considering developing its project as a no-basement project, which would eliminate the need for the underdrain system. This may be an attractive alternative in today's home building environment where home builders and home buyers are looking to ways to reduce housing costs, end quote. They state they do not need an underdrain for their development. This is stating it is not necessary for public improvements. They even offer up the benefit as an attractive alternative. They now are trying to state is a public improvement and need for sanitation and storm sewer improvements and using the power of the Metro District to enforce eminent domain for condemnation on the easements. This is an abuse of power through a Metro District for private use. These easements are not necessary for their development, and this case is not similar to the 2016 eminent domain case with the Saratoga Falls Metro District that involved simply moving irrigation ditches or culverts. I lived in a community for over 5 years in Fort Collins built by Hartford Homes known as Dry Creek, and that development was built as a no-basement project and sold out and met the housing needs for the area. And even today, those homes are selling for almost the same price as neighboring homes with basements. This eminent domain proceeding is being commenced primarily to advance a private interest or private use and does benefit the developer and should not be a public improvement financed, owned, and maintained by the Metro District, and there should be no additional condition to the IGA for the underdrain, mainly due to the fact the Metro District will control and monopolize the underdrain for my property and neighboring properties. Lastly, they have not acted in good faith. They have not pursued all reasonable options and exercised due diligence to obtain the easements as they have stated, and this contradicts D on page 4. There are 3 parties that have been involved in this for the past 5+ years, and not one of us has accepted an offer from the developing Lorson Company or received a fair assurance to the connection of the underdrain. Not one person or party has entered into a fair repay agreement. Let's think about that for a second. If the easement underdrain is such a necessity and vital part for the construction and development of their property and for the greater good of the public and community, like they are now stating, why didn't they reach a fair repay agreement with anyone? In over 5+ years of negotiations, did they pursue all reasonable and fair options to obtain the easements? The answer is no. This is because every negotiation or effort was an unfair attempt to extort, manipulate, control, or own the easement for their benefit and advancement of their interests. Lorson knew and often threatened they could use the Metro District to condemn easements through eminent domain. In almost every agreement, memorandum, email, and document I received, there was always mention and threat of eminent domain. In just 3 exhibits, F, G, and H, that were submitted to the staff, all had mention and use of the Metro District enforcing eminent domain. Is this fair? Is this a reasonable effort, or is it abuse of power? They have tried to lure, force, and exhaust all parties into unfair agreements insomuch they even leveraged farm leases against me and denied entrance onto the property to harvest crops in an effort to force me to sign an agreement that started interest accruing liens at a rate of 18% to be placed on my property and required them to be a primary lien holder on my bank note and possibly forfeiting my farm as collateral. Is this really the type of developer the town wants to work with building a community? They have also not done an underground water study on the effects of installing the underdrain They have also not done an underground water study on the effects of installing a underdrain on their property and how it will affect my 3 irrigation wells necessary for my survival. They have not done a study to see if the underdrain will increase or decrease my aquifer levels and or increase or decrease my water table because the underdrain will pull water from leaking canals and broken drain tiles and may affect water movement and seepage from those canals or even the reservoir. My property is within the state's 600-foot perimeter to their property and should have been included in the study performed in April of 2020. In closing, I have given the town's attorney and staff documentations and exhibits to provide a clear and concise picture of what is really going on here. I have provided stated facts tonight that contradict A, B, and D. I have given testimony from the developers in the memorandum on November 21st, 2022, stating they do not need the interdrain, and I oppose the district's affidavit stating that it is unable to proceed with the construction because of its inability to obtain interest by agreement with the right holders for this easement, which is further contradiction to their statement on page 4. The developer and the district are still in need of 2 separate easements to move forward with construction and development. One easement requires from the railroad company and the other from Janaconco, owner of Brent's Ranch. The Metro District does not need my underdrain easement for public sanitation improvements or public benefits, as it is stating. It wants it to increase profits and promote their interest, and is using the Metro District through eminent domain to try and acquire it. When extortion, bullying tactics, and unfair negotiations failed, they play the only card left in their hand. I also find it very ironic and strategic that the Metro District has petitioned for eminent domain now with council and planning staff that are new and unfamiliar with the history of this developer or this project. Lorson Company has always tried to advance their best interests, not mine, not neighboring properties, not the public's, and certainly not the town of Timnath. Once again, on record, I am requesting the town to deny the motion of eminent domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale. I appreciate your time. Mr. O'Leary, if you can contain it to 2 minutes, if you'd like to respond in any way, I'd give you that opportunity.
I think developer rep can add some information.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Benjamin Maresca. I'm with Fox Rothschild. We represent the owner and developer of Fisher Farms, Lorson South. I want to thank you first and foremost for giving me this opportunity, and I want to thank Carolyn and staff for working with the Metro District and the developer on this to try and figure this issue out. We have been working for a very long time with our client to actually put into motion the Fisher Farm project as approved by the city or by the town of Timnath. We've reviewed the IGA. We think the IGA is reasonable to all parties involved. We think it's fair. Each party involved in this that will use the underdrain is required to pay its proportionate share, and we think that's ultimately fair. Just for a little bit of color, I think this, from our perspective, my clients tried to work with Mr. Martindale in good faith for years. We first started this process with Mr. Martindale in 2021. The first agreement we sent to Mr. Martindale was in March of 2022. We did not receive a response to that until I think the first response we received from Mr. Martindale was in February of 2023. The memo he's referencing was our request to get, I think that was in November of 2022, that was a request to get a response from Mr. Martindale sent through his attorney, Brad Marsh. The response we ever got was that Mr. Martindale is a farmer who is busy farming and he can't be bothered with these issues. As Mr. Martindale mentioned, in 2022, he expanded his easement over the hall, or he amended his easement over the hall's property, which, if you would notice, he would have to come through the Lorson property and the Fisher Farm subdivision. There's no reason to have a hall easement other than to block Fisher Farms from accessing an easement, because he would need an easement from Lorson and Fisher Farms in order to utilize the hall easement. We believe that this is an attempt to negotiate, not in good faith, to get something for free. Our agreements have consistently included his ability to connect Countryside Estates to the underdrain system. And I would like to remind, Countryside Estates is exactly that. It's an estate property. It's a residential subdivision. So as much as Mr. Martindale presents himself as a farmer, he's here in a development capacity. And we have no issue with Countryside Estates connecting to the underdrain. In fact, as Ms. Steffel mentioned, the underdrain is going to be designed to handle flows from other properties. It provides a public service to the region, or the small region, I'll give you that, but it's not just for the benefit of the Fisher Farms project. In the timing since 2021, we've had our plat expire. We haven't been able to record our plat. CDs, I believe, have expired too, so the developer has suffered economic harm as a result of this. What we would like to see is, this is not the process the developer would want to go through in order to get an easement. We've presented the amount of time and energy and money that goes into trying to get to this point of 4 years. Resubmittal of projects is not helpful. But the project, as anticipated, always included the underdrain, always included the option to have basement lots. Families looking for homes utilize basements for storage. They utilize basements are very routine in subdivisions now. There is a possibility to not have a basement lot, but to remove the underdrain would require amendment of the service plan. It would require amendment of the plat and the CDs and everything else that has gone into the project that we've already spent the money on and gotten approval of. So from the developer's position, we feel that we've put 4 years into this project. As I said, we've waited literally years in between responses from Mr. Martindale at certain times. And our feeling is that every time we feel that we've had an agreement, the goalposts have been moved. So in conjunction with working with the district, the thought was to utilize the power under the service plan to create public utility for use by the Fisher Farm project, as well as other projects in the area that could tap into it. And the idea being that typically the improvement would be funded up front. We're talking about in 2022 dollars, which are not the same as 2025 dollars, we were looking at an underdrain cost of $4.5 million. Today it's probably over $5 million at this point. And you would typically get buy-in from anyone who's going to utilize that up front. We have told Mr. Martindale and anyone else we will front the cost of that improvement, and they're just required to pay their share when they tie in and develop their community. And so the 200-acre Countryside Estate community that's proposed would have access as long as they pay their proportionate share of the improvement cost at that time. And so if it were to develop. So I'm available to answer any questions you might have or to fill in any gaps in anything I brought.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Ms. Steffel, just again, there's nobody here from the Hall property that wishes to address us. Is that right? Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
We also did receive public comment from Charles Hollenbeck about this as well. That's been provided to all of council with his public ones on this, even though it's not a public hearing. It was submitted as a general public.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Steffel, I'm sure council has questions. Is there any more information before we get to that?
I guess I'd just like to remind you that it's not our goal to determine which party is correct in their assessment of the facts. If they are allowed to proceed with eminent domain, then there are certain findings that have to be made through a judicial proceeding, including that they have made a faith offer and what the fair market value of that offer is as well. So I encourage you to look at the language of the IGA and think about whether the question before you is whether this should be a permitted use of eminent domain, and if so, whether the IGA has sufficient protection.
Thank you. Council, begin with questions.
I have a lot of questions. So Mr. Hollenbeck indicated that there is also a sand dike ditch company, the ditch that runs, and I pulled up a map from the Poudre Heritage Organization that, and it's hard to read because it's small, but I circled it, and this ditch looks like it is in the area of both of the properties, and certainly in the area of the Halls property. And the comment is that that the right-of-way easements, et cetera, have have been obtained, and yet Mr. Hollenbach contends that there's been no communication with the Sand Dike Ditch Company, and an agreement with the Sand Dike Ditch Company. Without it, you can't do the underdrain. So,
And we were informed right before the meeting as well. We checked with a developer, and the developer indicated he did know the ditch owner, and they're going to be able to negotiate a crossing. So there's a crossing.
There's no agreement at this point in time.
No, but they also haven't started construction on it.
So
that's part of the process of
all
the construction.
right-of-ways and easements have been obtained is not accurate, and is not an accurate
And
statement.
we weren't aware of that prior to the meeting.
Yeah, I
think
know. I'm
that was
just
something.
trying to get at the
Understood.
facts. The other thing that sort of troubles me is we've come up with the Loveland eminent domain standards as a model, which may be a very good model to go by in terms of setting criteria, but the town hasn't adopted those as part of our land use code yet.
Well, remember, this is not a public hearing. This is not a quasi-judicial matter where you need to have specific criteria.
Nevertheless, we're
That's
being
true.
asked to use those criteria to make a determination or a judgment, whether it's quasi-judicial or otherwise, based on a set of criteria that we have not, as a council or a planning commission, adopted. And I guess it's sort of like putting the cart before the horse in my mind. If we're going to have criteria, which I think we should have, we should adopt them. It should go through an appropriate process with planning commission, staff, and council, and we should adopt them, and then we should apply them once they're accepted. That's my perspective on it.
And I think in response to that, or add something to that, I think that there has been only one other situation where that was necessary. And the majority of these situations, probably two in the entire time that I've been doing districts in the town of Timnath, you're able to negotiate those easements. 3 years of trying to negotiate with the property owner is
Yeah,
extreme.
I feel your pain.
Yes. So I think the other part of it is the eminent domain process is independent. Permission to utilize that doesn't mean that you're agreeing to condemn. We still have to go through that judicial process if we're not able to reach a settlement with the gentleman over here.
Right.
And that's going to be determined by the court, not by
So,
the district or...
yeah, so I mean, it sounds like you, as I understand it, you guys want to develop Fisher Farm subdivision. You want the underdrain. Countryside also wants, I presume, Mr. Martindale, based on what I read, ultimately wants to see Countryside develop. I think the town would be happy if both properties developed and there was an equitable and fair agreement between all the parties. And it sounds like in the IGA, the comment that I heard from our council was the agreement that allows other properties to connect to the drain, and that the costs essentially would be fair, which is what I'm hearing what Mr. Martindale wants.
Correct.
Is a fair agreement. So I'm having a hard time understanding why, if everybody wants to see happen, including the town, and we want it to be fair to all of the properties that would utilize it, why you guys can't come to an agreement.
And we've got, you know, guardrails by having the engineer available to take a look at it, but they've been negotiating for 3 years to try to get something. They're now without counsel. I don't believe Mr. March is still involved. But we're unable for 3 years to negotiate anything. Don't have one signed agreement.
There's 3 parties involved. It's not just me. There's Janet Conco, which owns Brent's Ranch. There's the Halls, and there's myself. So there's 3 parties involved that all own an interest with the easement on the Halls property, and nobody has gone into an agreement with Fisher Farms in 5 years.
And there's one easement. I mean, it already exists and is drawn on the map. That's where it was contemplated to be in the first place. So there should be an ability to do that. Eminent domain is only used as a last resort. So if you aren't able to come to a conclusion or an agreement.
Have you guys tried to go to maybe an arbitrator to try to work across the 3 groups of owners involved here, or 4 if you count the Halls? They need to be involved. It just seems it puts council in a position of, I feel like we're trying to figure out, we're getting involved in a private matter and having to make a judgment, whether it's quasi-judicial or not. It just feels very uncomfortable from this councilman's perspective. And I'm sure our mayor and other council member have comments or questions.
I'm sorry, the question was, has arbitration been attempted or considered?
Well, we've attempted to, the issue that the developer has had is that, as I said, we've submitted multiple versions of reimbursement agreements we thought were fair to Mr. Martindale. With regard to the Halls, the communications we've received is that they have an easement in place, which Mr. Martindale negotiated with them to, after we started negotiations with Mr. Martindale, he negotiated separately with to amend his easement to make it exclusive. Again, an easement he doesn't have direct access to get to. And so then we had no ability to utilize that easement as well. But rightly understood, the Halls don't want their property littered with multiple easements. They want a single easement, and I think, and I don't intend to speak for them, want to in any way, but I think my understanding of that situation is that they have the easement and they're not really trying to provide another easement to another party. And so if for their purposes, they've already granted the easement. And so we're looking to utilize an easement that's already in existence and submitted what we believe are reasonable agreements that in a lot of ways line exactly with the IGA to Mr. Martindale. And again, the first iteration of that agreement, we did not receive comments back for a year. We turned that agreement back to them with red line comments trying to negotiate this easement. Next round, we didn't hear back for 8 months. And so that's what our negotiations have been like. We don't have the luxury of having an agreement with Mr. Martindale that requires him seek arbitration. And there's no way that we could have a binding arbitration with Mr. Martindale because we don't have a contractual right to that. So we feel that we've done what we, as a developer, trying to put a project in place that, again, not only serves our property, serves his project that he wants to build at a cost of $4.5 million to run that pipe, which he will have to write a check for until the moment he decides to develop Countryside Estates, which, as you mentioned, they're both good for the town of
I'm going to move us
Timnath.
along. Thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm struggling with, if we back to our packet here. Let me get back to it. So we're supposed to use, I guess, in this, these factors adopted pursuant, included as relevant. Number B, I guess, letter B, the eminent domain proceedings are not to be commenced to advance private interest or private use. What I'm struggling with here is private interest or private use. So we talk about this pipeline being for residents. This is going to be a development. Help me want to vote in favor of this.
It's for drainage. I mean, the bottom line is it's for drainage. It's not for sewer. The sewer easements that are in existence are different and separate. This is for drainage for the site and the development, which benefits the entire region. So those are public improvements. They are off-site, but they're necessary in order to take that flow of water off-site and take it to somewhere where the town has already connected in. We're connecting 2 points. We're also utilizing to the maximum extent possible. We're going down our property line for the majority of it. So they've tried to be as efficient as possible at paying that surface water and that drainage, which is a public improvement.
You said regional?
It is, because other properties can tie into the drain system to help with their drainage as well.
Okay. So
You're asking for access without cost.
Okay.
So I'm just trying. This is how. Yeah.
Okay.
So
These were defined as public improvements in the service plan for the Metropolitan
so
District.
It's in the service plan.
It's
Correct.
in the service plan
Okay,
as
thank you.
this specific line actually shows it going through this same pathway in the service plan defined as a public improvement.
And those are capital improvements,
That was by the
public
town.
improvements.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
So it's not accurate to call it private. It is public. The
is.
drainage
Thank you.
and the offsite and the running of the water is public in nature. It's a public improvement. It can be financed through Metro District. As you're well aware, they can only finance public improvements. We cannot finance private improvements through the Metro District. We're not allowed. We don't have powers.
And that concern was especially what we addressed in the IGA to say that this would be owned and maintained by the Metropolitan District as a public improvement to allow that connection.
And Metro Districts can't operate and maintain private improvements. We can't use public funds for a private purpose. So these are public.
So looking then at number 5, the key point, right? This was added to meet this criterion B, right? Carolyn, that's where you're talking about that. So in the IGA, is that, so that's number, so key point of IGA there is number 5, right? So this is added to be number 5, right? So 5 was added to be meet number B, right? Is that where you're talking about? So I make sure I understand the key points.
Yes, yes. Also when they go through the eminent domain process, they are required to prove that it is for a public purpose. Otherwise, they may not use eminent domain. The Metropolitan District will be required to establish this before the court.
Okay.
A, B, C, D, E, and F are all from the Loveland document, correct? Essentially.
Yes, so none of them are mandatory. This is a legislative matter, as are all special district approvals. So the council has discretion to say, we don't like those factors. This was just a proposed recommendation from staff that we wanted to give you something to look at to help you make this decision.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do also have another question that has to do with water table levels, et cetera. And we already have experience here in Timnath with it. That's with the Timnath Lakes project, where there has been drainage, and as a consequence of that drainage, so they could build basements. So very similar to what's being asked here. There were numerous existing wells in Old Town that went dry. And to my knowledge, they have not yet become usable again. And the developer there, and I don't know all of the details, Scott can probably address specifics, but my understanding is that there's obligations of the developer to provide water to those existing well owners in the interim until the system is able to fill up, and we'll see if the water table comes back. And if not, then they're obligated to drill new wells for those existing well owners that currently are dry. And as a farmer who depends on existing wells for his living on that land, you know, it's a reasonable concern that he has. He doesn't know if his wells are going to go dry if this is, let's say the domain's approved, or even that you guys come to an agreement. What happens in the interim if his wells that he depends on for farming go dry? There's nothing in the IGA here that says, hey, we'll take care of it, that I've seen. So that's a concern for me. I just feel like this is a little premature. And I know you guys have been at it for 4 years, but there's still questions here that concern me.
And Councilman Jenkins, honestly, that was something that until we received the information, that's never been brought up for us as a concern. I will tell you though, representing developers and home builders primarily is my practice. Before that, I was a planner. Right. So understanding how these things work. As a developer, if we were to dewater property and harm our neighbors as a result of it, the water law in Colorado is pretty well set, and you're absolutely right that if we were to damage a neighbor through our actions, we would be responsible for that. That's how the law in Colorado works.
Right.
Same as stormwater. I can't flood my neighbor's property with my stormwater. And our under drain plans will be approved submitted to the town and approved, and they're public improvements, so we're going to have to vet those, and we have our water engineers that we work with. I wish we had our water engineer here who could speak to that, but if as you've mentioned, if you damage your neighbor's water supplies, you're responsible for that. So we're going to take every effort not to do so.
Okay. I would like to ask a question about alternatives. The Hall property was selected as the route for this because it's the cheapest, as I understand it. Can somebody tell me, if the Hall property were not in play, what are the alternatives to routing this underdrain?
Well, I think alternatively, I think the reason that the Hall property was selected is because there was an existing easement. And I think the reason the existing easement where it is because these are gravity lines. They run with gravity, and that's the location for the best alternative for running a gravity-fed line that's eventually going to outlet into the city system. As far as alternatives go, it dramatically increases the cost. As I said, this is a line to dewater a piece of property that right now we expect to run just conservatively between $4 and $5 million. And so when you start to have to push things uphill, push water uphill, it becomes much more expensive. You have to put in infrastructure that eventually the homeowners are going to, through their O&M fees and their taxes, they're going to pay for operation of that over time. And the idea there is to limit that in order to provide the service to the public, to limit the public as they move forward. As far as alternatives, we felt that this was the best alternative because of the geology, because of the geography, and because of the existing easement. And so, as we said, we wanted to keep it in large part off of the town's right of way, keep it on our property as much as we can, and in order to do that, this was absolutely the best alternative we could find.
Okay. But you acknowledge there are other options if this fails.
That would be better answered by our engineer. I'm not an engineer. I would have to look into that, but there may be some other alternatives. But I can't speak with authority on that.
Council, we've dedicated quite a bit of time to this. Are there any other pressing questions?
No.
Okay. At this time, are there any motions?
Move to approve resolution number 4 is 2025, a resolution approving intergovernmental agreement between the town of Timnath and Fisher Farms Metropolitan District Number 1 regarding limited authority to exercise eminent domain.
Is there a second? There's no second, so the motion fails for lack of a second. We could entertain a motion to deny, or we could entertain a motion to table if council felt that additional information might be useful in the future.
I would like to see you guys come to an agreement that was suitable to both parties, which, so I'd be willing to make a motion to table this item and come back, hopefully, don't come back, come to an agreement. But I'd be willing to offer a motion to table them to a future date, maybe give it a month or so.
Okay. There's a motion to table. Is there a second? And I would second the motion to table. Before we vote on it, is there any discussion on the motion to table?
Just to clarify, this is would be a motion to continue until February 11th, 2025.
Fine.
I think I have two opinions. I appreciate the motion to table, definitely, to get other opinions here. I think that's very valuable. So I appreciate that opinion and I think that'll be valuable here. I think the part that I'm struggling with is what do we do in the interim, and what do we hope to accomplish out of this? I would hope that the parties involved could resolve this so we wouldn't need to table it.
Yeah.
To your opinion, to your statement, Councilman Jenkins. I would like to see maybe if staff could, how feasible it is to bring something to council to maybe get us, I don't know if it's Loveland, I don't know, Carolyn, what's possible. Maybe we could have a work session. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if we could pull something together, but looking at something like Loveland or what it might be, but I'm not sure a month will solve anything, in my opinion. I'd rather not have this IGA with the town. I'm really hesitant to have the town weigh in on this, balancing a metro district, balancing property rights of property owners. That's my hesitation to table it, but that's why I didn't vote in favor of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other perspective I have is I would hope that Mr. Martindale would define exactly what would be full and fair and equitable from his perspective, and put it up as a counter offer. So, so the other party says, hey, we can do that, or gee, that's close, but we need, you got to have two parties in an agreement. I'd like to see, and as a council member approving this, I can't really tell you what to do, right? I'm just saying it would be nice if you guys could actually actively work at trying to come to a solution that it satisfies all the parties.
And that's a great
without
suggestion.
requiring the town to approve eminent domain, because it
And
just doesn't feel right to me.
we'll attempt, maybe March is a better time to come back if we have to, but we'll attempt to negotiate in good faith. Ask that Mr. Martindale put his conditions in writing to us so we can work with him on his terms and conditions.
Is that a request for a friendly amendment to move it to March?
Correct.
Okay, so we could have a friendly amendment to continue it until instead, would you propose March 11th or 20th? Okay, March 11th.
In writing?
Okay, I'm going to move this along. Thank you, sir. Here's my perspective. The power of eminent domain is a significant power. It is that government bodies should use sparingly and when there are not alternatives. I believe the guidance that we've been provided in terms of looking at the Loveland standard is, given that we don't have our own standards. I know that this has been ongoing for many years, and I know that this needs to come to a conclusion. I share my council members' preference that this conclude outside of this council. But for me, the key piece of information that I need to make a decision is alternatives analysis and understanding whether or not this significant step of permitting the Metro District to pursue eminent domain really is the last alternative. And so when this comes back before me, that is very helpful information for me. But I will say that at some point, Fisher subdivision needs to move forward. And so I expect that one way or another that the subdivision would move forward from my perspective. All that said, all those in favor of continuing this matter until the March 11th meeting, by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? We will, yes, sir.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Just for our benefit so that we can come back on the 11th with what you're asking, as far as alternatives, and be very clear, we believe that as suggested, if we could obtain the easement on the terms that set forth in the IGA, I think we could have an agreement tomorrow. I think my client did that. We just have not been able to get to that point with the agreements we have in my packet that's sitting on the chair. So what to do is possibly be able to work with Carolyn and find out clear directive as far as what alternatives you'd like to see, because we feel that we've been as can be on this matter, and here we are 4 years later, one of you asking for this, and we feel that this is, we want to make sure that we can move this forward, because every day we're not able to do so is costing time and money and keeping houses from being built in Timnath. So.
Yep. No, we
And by
appreciate your
alternative analysis, do you mean engineering alternatives to running through the whole property, running through locations?
Yeah, I mean, just what comes to mind is one alternative is negotiating a separate easement with the Halls. Another is what are the other pipeline options? And, you tell me it will be more expensive, and I don't expect you to undertake some full study, but I'm sure there's some expert that could provide some sort of affidavit that could give us some sort of back of the napkin calculation.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I'll speak with my client, and we'll work with our engineering experts to provide that. So, just to reiterate, we felt that this was the right position for the easement because it then allows also Mr. Martindale, and it keeps from having, it consolidates structure into a singular point. And so that was the entire reason for utilizing this location.
Yep. So, very good. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time that went into this. We will see everyone back on March 11th, unless there is no need. All right, moving on to business item 8B, first reading and setting on January 28th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for Ordinance 2, Series 2025, an ordinance adopting the liquor tasting fee and amending Chapter 6 of the Municipal Code regarding liquor application and licensing fee. Again, this is just a first reading, so we will get a brief synopsis of the matter, and we'll conduct the public hearing if this passes at January 28th.
Thank you. Okay, so we are, this, as you mentioned, this is first reading of ordinance number 2, series 2025, and we are proposing an amendment to the liquor, the portion of the Timnath Municipal Code that relates to liquor license. There's two main goals. The first one is to update the statutory sites because the Colorado Beer and Wine Code and Colorado Liquor Code been recodified, so all of our statutory sites are outdated. So we need to update all of those statutory sites. The second item is to revise the fees, specifically the application fees, to better cover the administrative costs of processing applications and to add a fee for tastings and retail establishment permits, and those are the main purposes of this ordinance. And with that, we can, if the next slide has just a short summary of the changes, which you probably can't read, but they're in your packet, and that's what we have. And then we'll be bringing this back next in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you for that. Council, any questions? Is there a motion to approve on first reading and set a public hearing on January 28th, 2025 for this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Nope. All right. All those in favor of approving on first reading, setting a public hearing on January 20th, 2025 at 6 p.m. signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Carried unanimously. We'll move on to item 8C, first reading and setting a public hearing on January 28th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for Ordinance 3, Series 2020. Ordinance approving a temporary moratorium on the establishment of natural medicine facilities. Ms. Steffel.
Thank you. So the state voters did Proposition 122, which legalizes use, consumption, possession, sharing, and manufacturing of certain cultivation of certain natural medicines. And they define those to begin with as psilocybin and psilocin.
No, that's right.
Psilocin. And so this new ordinance the new state law came into effect on January 1. We have not had any applications yet for the town of Timnath to the state for any new businesses to be established. But this provides a 6-month moratorium on new businesses that provide natural medicine within the town and then go through July 28th. 6 months from the time of adoption, and it would allow the staff to really work through the new laws and new regulations and come back to you. We would propose a work session, working through Planning Commission, working through you. We expect to have land use code amendments that would reflect both the zoning to determine what the permitted uses are. We could also consider licensing or setbacks, or none of the above if that's and the will of council. But this does give us time to study that, determine what both council and allow for public comment on proceeding forward.
Very good. Any questions? Is there a motion to approve on first reading, set a public hearing on 8th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for this ordinance related to natural medicine facilities?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay, this motion carries unanimously. We'll be back on January 28th at 6 p.m. Business item 8D, setting a public hearing on January 28th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for Ordinance 4, Series 25, an ordinance approving the annexation of the property known as the Poudre School District, Timnath 50, into the town of Timnath. First reading, setting a public hearing for January 20th, 2025. Mr. Kemper.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be presenting item 8D and 8E concurrently, if that works for the council, and then we can do the motions separately. But as you mentioned, this reading will set the public hearing in 2 weeks, which will be January 28th, for the annexation of the property known as the Poudre School District, Timnath 50. But submitted to the town in April this year, or in 2024, requesting to annex approximately 50 acres of unincorporated land currently within Larimer County. And so, as you may recall, following the procedure of the State Annex Act on December 10th, this item was brought forth, a petition was brought forth to Town Council, starting the initiation, approving the initiation of the annexation of this property, setting up today's date. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Main Street and Busgrove Road, and is meeting the contiguity on the west along Main Street, the east on Timnath Parkway, and south within the North Timnath Farms annexation. The subject property will be requesting to zone to commercial use upon annexation, aligning with the future land use designation in our comprehensive plan. This application is satisfying the requirements for a voluntary annexation set forth by the Colorado Revised Statute. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions? Is there a motion to approve on first public hearing on January 28th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 4 relating to annexation of the Poudre School District?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Move on to business item 8E, first reading, setting public hearing on 2025 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 5, Series 25, an ordinance approving zoning map amendment for the property known as Poudre School District 50, first reading, setting public hearing for January 20th, 2025. We've already had the staff presentation. Council, any questions for staff on this? Okay. Is there a motion to approve on first reading, set a public hearing on January 20th, 2025 at 6 p.m. for ordinance number 5 relating to the zoning map amendment for Poudre School District property?
So moved.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All those in, any discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Very good. We have reached the end of our road. If there's no objection, we will stand